Good morning, my name is Josh from the National Weather Service in Duluth, Minnesota, and this video is going to be a quick January 2026 midwinter update. We're going to talk about how winter's been so far, and then also a quick outlook into the late winter and early spring. This is being recorded in the early morning on January 21st, 2026. So let's get right into it here and talk about how temperatures have been so far this winter. And you can see these are daily departures from normal at Duluth, pretty representative of the region as a whole though. You can see we've kind of had quite a few ups and downs so far this winter. So started off cold in December, got a little bit warmer towards the end of the month, and a lot warmer than normal for the early part of January. Now we're starting to kind of go below normal here. How has that kind of resulted? If we average it all together, well, this map on the right kind of shows you basically most places around average for temperatures, maybe just a touch below in a few places. Now let's talk about precipitation, and this is kind of a tale of the haves and the have-nots. Most of northeast Minnesota below average, and northwest Wisconsin above average. Here in Duluth, we've seen 1.31 inches of rain and melted snow. Normally we see about 2.16, so we're a bit below average here in Duluth, but again, northwest Wisconsin, completely different story. Translating this into snowfall, it's basically a mirror image because we've seen mostly snowfall throughout the winter here so far. So the storm track so far this winter has generally favored northwest Wisconsin for those larger storms we've had, combined with lake effect snow, so that's why they're above average over there. Northeastern Minnesota, we've seen more of the clipper type systems that have brought us, maybe an inch or two here and there. So that's what we've seen more of here. In Duluth, we've seen 20.9 inches of snow so far. Normally we see 30.5, so we're a bit below average there. Looking at snow depths currently across the region, in northeast Minnesota, generally ranging from about 6 to 12 inches. A little bit more as you go into the Arrowhead, though. Northwest Wisconsin is definitely the winner as far as snow depth goes, anywhere from 12 to about 18 inches for, especially those counties along the South Shore, and go into northern Iron County into the snow belt, approaching 30 inches. So how does this compare to normal? Well, no surprises here. Most of northeast Minnesota below average with snow depths, but a little bit above in pockets, especially the higher terrain along the North Shore. And then above normal, especially along the South Shore, those counties that are getting the lake effect, those areas have seen above normal snow so far this year, and therefore above normal snow depths at this time. So we've kind of talked about this being a La Nina winter, and let's just briefly talk about how that has kind of transpired. Typical conditions for a La Nina in the Northland. We get a jet stream that kind of sets up to our south, and that typically offers us more opportunities to see more of these cold air outbreaks, things like that. Not always. Kind of talked about how we've seen a lot of ups and downs with that so far this season. But we're certainly looking to get a lot colder in the near future here. Another fun thing that we sometimes see with La Nina winters is a quick transition from a mild fall into, right into winter conditions at some point around November. That doesn't always happen, but this year we certainly saw that. So snow depth at Duluth for all the days in November through currently, well, we saw no snow basically for most of November. Then we had our first storm where we got a 10-inch snow depth, and then we've held on to at least 6 inches since then. So indeed, this was a pretty typical La Nina transition into winter. And what are we looking like for the rest of the spring, or late winter into early spring? Probably transitioning into an ENSO neutral pattern, but we'll probably see La Nina conditions having an effect on our weather for at least the next month and a half or so. So how has everything transpired as far as ice cover on Lake Superior? Well, this graph on the right shows all the different ice covers we've seen since 1973. The black line shows what we've seen this year, so maybe a touch below average so far, but you can see in the past few days we're starting to nudge upward as we've seen more colder weather move in. We can expect more of that too for the rest of the month of January at least. But where is the ice currently? Basically hugging the South Shore. Everywhere else, pretty much clear of ice. So let's look ahead now for the next few months. So these are the February outlooks from the Climate Prediction Center, slightly favoring below normal temperatures and very slightly favoring above normal precipitation. I'd say it could go really either way with precipitation. We'll have to see how things transpire there, but at least temperature-wise, I think there's a little bit more favor that the La Nina conditions are going to, favor a little bit more of the cold weather outbreaks that we're going to see for the rest of January, perhaps persisting into at least the early part of February there. And for the rest of winter into the early spring, very slight lean towards below normal temperatures, but that will probably be most likely in the February part of that. March and April, a little bit more uncertain, and leaning towards very slightly towards above normal precipitation. We'll see how that transpires. We may see more of the haves and have-nots depending on how storm tracks set up, especially as we get into March and April. So as we go into spring, let's talk about drought first of all. So current drought conditions across the Northland, most places still hanging on to moderate to severe drought. And we kind of went into winter with this. And since we typically don't see a lot of liquid precipitation in the winter compared to, let's say, the spring and the summer, well, it's more likely that we're going to see this drought persist into the spring, even with around normal to slightly above normal precipitation. The exception to this would be if we ended up with a very active pattern into the later part of winter and spring. Then we could perhaps create a noticeable dent in this. Another way of looking at this is precipitation needed to end drought conditions in the next 3 months, and this is definitely an estimate, but anywhere from 5 to 7 inches around the region here. So are we likely to see this much precipitation? Well, that would be on the high end if we got a really active pattern in the later parts, of winter and spring. Not necessarily the likely solution, but it's a slight possibility, anyways. So, talking about fire weather potential as we go into spring, a lot of unknowns with this. It really depends on what happens in the spring. That's what's going to determine the actual risk for fire weather conditions. But we are going to be going into this with the drought conditions that we have now. So if we had our drought persist into spring and we ended up with a dry weather period, let's say after snow melt sometime in the spring, there could be an increased fire weather potential. So a lot of unknowns right now, but just something to keep in your back pocket since we do have the one precondition of having drought ongoing right now. So let's take a look at hydro trends very quickly across the region. So bottom left, these maps show stream flow conditions right now, basically around normal for most places, but below normal for parts of northeast Minnesota. And again, that kind of overlaps with where we're seeing the below normal snow depth. So net result is looking at least at this time, a low chance to around normal chance for spring flooding at this time. This could change if we ended up with a widespread rain or snow pattern in the next couple months, but at least as of now, looking like a low to normal risk. And I would say if there was any place that would be the most risky for spring flooding, probably would be in northwest Wisconsin, where snow depths are above average at this point. But we'll have to see how the later part of winter and spring kind of transpires. So that will kind of end the presentation for the most part here. I did want to do a quick plug for CoCoRaHS. If you're not already a part of CoCoRaHS and you're interested in observing precipitation, rain, and or snowfall, I'd highly encourage you to check out CoCoRaHS. All you do is buy this standard rain gauge, and then you can start sending in your precipitation observations, used by all sorts of entities, us at the National Weather Service, state climatologists, hydrologists, emergency managers, civil engineers, and more. So you could really be a part of the science and help lead to better forecasts. So again, go to cocorahs.org if you want to learn more. But to wrap everything up here, so far this winter, we've seen a mixed bag of temperatures, warm and cold, and haves and have-nots with the precipitation and snowfall. For the rest of winter and early spring, kind of looking at a slight lean towards below normal temperatures and above normal precip, kind of hanging on to a little bit of those La Nina conditions that may affect our weather with all things averaged out. Again, spring trends, we'll see what happens in the spring, but right now looking at a low to around normal chance for spring flooding risks, but we'll have to see how the rest of winter and early spring end up. So with that, I want to thank you for tuning in. If you have any questions, there are a lot of ways to contact us at the National Weather Service: phone, email, social media. So if you have any questions, let us know. And the next thing to pay attention to are the spring flood outlooks. This will be released around March 12th of 2026, and we will be sending out briefings here from the National Weather Service in the weeks before, around, or after this date, especially if the spring flood threat happens to be above normal. So stay tuned for those. And with that all said, I want to say thank you for tuning in. Bundle up out there and enjoy the rest of winter.